Very humbled by that opening. Hi, Squile. Good day to everybody. Thanking Chief Salish for opening us up with the words today, and also acknowledging that he had to leave right after lunch. All of our elders, Tom Sampson, Julie Finkbonner, her and her mom had to leave. I want to really acknowledge all the elders who are here, the students, both of the Northwest Indian College, our neighboring schools. Thank you for taking the time out to share a meal with us, to share some time with us, and also to my fellow council members, Councilman Brocky and Julie, who had to leave. Thank you for being here, for your support. Openly would like to say thanking them for allowing me to help out for the 4th year as tribal chairman and representative of our people. If it is that we do have great leaders, it's because we embrace the values that have allowed our people to survive for so long. And that doesn't go just for me, but for any of our tribal leaders and elders who help move forward the sense of community that has been here since time immemorial. It's because of the values that hold us all together. And we get those from we get those teachings from our elders. So it's important that we acknowledge them, thank them for what they do, and everything the support that they provide for us. This is a rare opportunity for me. I, in my 4th year, think that my job is more to listen than to speak, and to take action that helps the people. So having a platform to actually say what's on my mind is few and far between. So I think I'll take this opportunity to go ahead and say what I've promised to Dr. Guillory for years now, that being here at the Northwest Indian College, I want to acknowledge that we've come so far as a people, and this institution is a sign of that. Thanking all the students who participate here. I actually did not, while living here my whole life. I came here for summer programs, both as a student at Sequest and as I don't even know what I was called. I think I was the bus driver for one of Emma's classes at Upward Bound some 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And we'd bring students in and teach science, and I've never been told, but I hope that was for the hope that one day they'd go into practice, that it would set policy that would help protect the people. What I'd also like to acknowledge is that Dr. Wally Heath, someone that we formed an alliance with early on, helped us develop our aquaculture. Just a few miles right down the road in Lummi Bay. Our leadership at the time in the mid-70s said that this is something that's good for the people, something that will help sustain our harvest. Our harvest is dependent on 3 things. For the time being, a hatchery supplement, good habitat, and good hydro. And that goes for everything, regardless of it's fish or shellfish. Everything that helps spread the table that we just shared today. Again, you're thanking the cooks for the good meal. And when our leadership decided to establish the aquaculture facility, they also said that we need a skilled workforce to help maintain this facility. And from that grew the Lummi School of Aquaculture, the Lummi Community College, and now the Northwest Indian College. There's 1,200 students, President Guillory, currently 1,200 students, a number of satellites, 6 4-year programs, and as soon as we get a master's program, this is the promise I've made, that the thing that I would love to see, I'll die a happy man, is when it turns into the Salish Sea University. and we've already discussed that the mascot's going to be the reef netters. Although I don't sit on the college board, that's my pitch to the people of be bold, plan for the future, plan for something that helps both helps us stay grounded, helps preserve what is ours, and gives hope. So, thanking the Northwest Indian College, Steve for being here from the Western, and starting something that I think could be good for the people. Here at the Northwest Indian College, the Vine Deloria Symposium that's held every year helps transfer knowledge between people, between generations, and helps alter and shape the future within the classrooms. And I really think that that's the platform for the future is here at the college. One thing that I've failed to do as tribal chairman is do what I always wanted to do, and that's host meetings here at the college, general council meetings here at the college. So maybe this is my first step towards doing that. So I'm very thankful for being asked to participate in this event, and want to also say that when asked, there was the mention of speaking about or speaking to issues of today, the current issues, and probably what I'm guessing is speaking about our protection of Cochiacan. I may or may not talk about that. We'll see, but what I will tell you is at the end of it, I hope you have an understanding of what our position is and why we've exerted our treaty right to protect one of our village sites, to protect our fishing rights, to protect something that was negotiated just 150, 200 years ago at the treaty negotiations. That's a way of life. And I'm so thankful every time I get to climb the hills, nearly touch the top of the mountain. Every time you get to go fishing with one of your kids. I have two boys that I love. And every time you get to do something that's either on or in the water or by the fire, that right was retained for us from the men and women who went down to Mukilteo and negotiated a peace treaty with the federal government. And so happy this morning that I got to share breakfast with our elder Tom, and I'm gonna chop up this word. I know that Stoyum Nukwal. And I'm struggling with the counterpart to that of Stoyum Nual, the act of agreeing, the concept of a treaty, the concept of coming together to make an agreement and this is my interpretation of it, to preserve something, to form an alliance. There's our oral history shows us and tells us that this is something that was done well before our treaty with the United States. The fact that Tom's here sharing a meal with us and telling us of our stories and our histories and the origins of our communities, that in the past, the Lummi people who inhabited the San Juan Islands had no conceptual idea of the United States-Canadian boundary right now. We were, and still are, a sophisticated structure of family groups who harvested shared resources and celebrated life. And those celebrations of life, just as the meal that we had today, were the ratifications of decisions that are made. To kind of, much as I bet Steve and Emma and Marco sat in deliberation over these last half year of how should this new thing of ours transpire and play out. How should this Salish Sea speaker series be conducted, and what end would it be of? The meal that you just had ratified that decision. Thanking the Bob family for contributing to that with their song. These customs of ours have always been here. Something that I just realized in the past few years is my short few years on council, how much time it takes in to make a major decision, something that will affect us for generations. And being in what I consider these small community roles of leadership, you're in the trenches because people want results right now. People want their life better right now. And it takes an appropriate amount of time to balance everything out to make a decision. And when you consider that, the treaty that was negotiated with the federal government took a matter of a few years. That's amazing that our past leaders were able to decide in such a short amount of time, what do we need at a minimum to survive? How can we be able to spread the table and come together as people and make sure that we still have the chance to sit with our elders from other communities? The right to fish and hunt is an addition to the treaty negotiation that if you go across the country, the federal government systematically had an approach of how they would negotiate treaties with Indian nations. And I thank the Creator every day that our people made sure that the right to fish and hunt was explicitly in the treaty. To me, that's a sign of leadership. The leaders of the Pacific Northwest have always been the Coast Salish people, have always included them, has always included us. And that decision is playing out right before our eyes. Regardless of what was negotiated for in the treaty, regardless of what we thought we were negotiating, how much of the authority and claim over the land we thought we negotiated for, how much the federal government thought that they obtained, what was ceded, what wasn't, that's still playing out right before us as we live. Some of it's just, and there's injustices that go along with it. I really think that's our job to make sure that regardless of what happens, that we get to enjoy the things that we always have in and on the water, because we're people of the water. I'm hoping that someday, the first time, I remember that the first times that different types of fishing, different types of things on the water, the first canoe races that I went through, I want other people to have those firsts. If it's fishing here in Bellingham Bay, going over to Portage, going down south of the San Juan Islands for halibut and prawns, the different types of salmon fishing that we participate in now. I want Troy, our new reef net captain, to be able to lead a crew of people and bring back our first catch in over 100 years from the reef net. That would be a day to celebrate. And there's so much in front of us that is a challenge to either maintain what we have or to bring us to that day where we will revitalize the technology that the Lummis created. Now, I'm not going to be able to tell you of the any scientific data of why we made our decision. But I can tell you that we did it because it's the right thing for us, and I'm so grateful that going back to the term of coming together with an agreement and alliance, that what I've been told is other people think it's the right thing to do as well. It's if anything, anyone who's paying attention to the dealings of Quachiak and the protection of our village site, what's going on right now is that the decision of will that treaty right be honored. As I mentioned, this is something that our people have done for generations with other neighboring communities. Most often they were native communities. We'd make peace treaties with other folks out in the islands, in Vancouver Island, and we would protect what is ours. So our leadership in 1855 had an idea of coming to terms with another community. And just from the things that our families teach us, I'm pretty sure they made those agreements based on integrity, with the hope that the other side of the table had integrity to keep their word. So, roughly a year ago, January 5th, we sat down with the Army Corps of Engineers and said, we request our treaty right to be protected. We made the decision on this specific issue that it's going to impact an agreement that we made, and we're exerting our right to say no. Depending on how they respond will be a sign of their integrity. So for anyone watching, for anyone who wanted to join the alliance, know that if there is a decision that doesn't uphold the treaty, that's a breach of trust. Also know that it won't be over, because this is outside of the federal zone parameters of the what's is getting to the technical discussion of the environmental review process from the feds. That's something separate on its own track, and in a way pause until they decide, are they going to keep their integrity? I generally have a good faith for communities and people, so I think they will. Willing to take questions about that if anyone has them, but just something that I just realized over the last 2 years is that there's a misunderstanding about that. And I also want to acknowledge that our decision to exert the treaty right isn't just for fishing, it's for the protection of the village site and the cultural properties that are up there on the site. Later on today, when we're going to go speak at Western, one of my first jobs that was not fishing was an intern here at Northwest Indian College, where just months before the disturbance at Semiyama, I cataloged archaeological artifacts that are up at Western that came from Cherry Point. Boxes and boxes and boxes of stone artifacts that are still up there that need to be repatriated. unspoken history of Westerns, some of the past faculty and students took it upon themselves to extract those and remove them and deface the integrity of a burial site. It's documented. That's the reason. That's the first documented archaeological site in Washington State. Chief Salish often reminds me that that's not spoken about enough. One of my colleagues, Councilman Julius, puts it best of saying, building on top of Cherry Point would be the same thing as building on top of Arlington. Building on top of any cemetery. Regardless of what impacts you, how do you mitigate that? How do you mitigate the value of life? You can't. So I guess what I'm saying both to our allies and also to our people, regardless of how the Army Corps decides to come through with its determination, which probably will be within the month, we'll hold them accountable regardless of what the decision is, because it's the right thing to do. Well, I don't know how you did it, but you convinced me to talk about Cherry Point, so that's but regardless of what the issue is, I do want to acknowledge that the other thing that probably brought you here today is the understanding of the greatness of where we live. Aside from our past leadership retaining rights that perpetuates our way of life and our culture, I'm grateful they stayed here. You know, these islands and the mountainsides are so much of who we are. That I know we were here since time immemorial because of how we're connected to them. I'm pretty sure we all have those experiences of either fishing, hiking, hunting, something that at one point in time, regardless if you were with your parent or grandparent, family member or friend, that you were with the Spirit. And when you're with someone else, that's that sense of community. When you bring the resources home and spread the table, that's the sense of community that needs to be protected. All of that is just so important. These are the reasons that we've made these decisions. Our current one, and I'm probably, speaking of things that are being said publicly about not just us, but maybe other opponents of the project. I don't want to say opponents of the project, but the protectors of the community that we live in. There's always a balance to something. We've been portrayed as possibly being in front of jobs that are needed for the community. As a community leader, and again, Dr. Guillory, you're doing such a good job of graduating students here, that every quarter I get approached from students who say, I have a hard time finding a job with the tribe. I mean, that tells me it's my responsibility to help generate more jobs that can help families choose what it is they want to do. But not at the cost of a better tomorrow. Not at the cost of being able to have clam chowder on the table. And not just now or today, but to be able to make sure that our grandkids have those first experiences of being out on the water. there's so much to be done, but with good people just like you, the leaders of today and tomorrow, just like you, I have hope. And I thank you for whatever it is you do to protect the community. Don't get discouraged. Whatever it is you do, continue it and ask yourself, can I do more? With that, it's a privilege to be here, very humble to be asked to participate in the first of these speaking series, and really look forward to the next one and all of those afterwards. ACM,
I live at the mouth of the NWIC River, and I appreciate everything that that you're doing and the leadership that you're taking with the Corps of Engineers. And I speak for many of my friends in the Ballew community as well, and we deeply appreciate your leadership in this regard. I think the time is such that the Lummis were the people that could take this action, and I'm humbled and very grateful for your action.
Hi, my name is Ray Charles, Sam Filipino, and I just wanted to ask, is the Lummi Nation trying to strengthen or create any type of federal laws that would help protect our village sites and burial sites?
That's a great question. Also want to acknowledge that two former chairmen here, both my dad and Daryl, and during the tenure. So as I said, in 1999, when I was up at Western taking pictures of artifacts, writing them down, and I forget the whole process, but we were called from that job to do an emergency response with a huge group of archaeologists, anthropologists, and folks from the tribe to respond to a grave site that was unearthed up at Semiyama that was roughly the size of this room. Imagine sitting where you are, looking up to the top of the ground with bones all around you. And the unfortunate thing about that, aside from the inhumane digging up of a gravesite, was a lack of response from the federal government to have policies that would protect sites like that. That's something we've always struggled with. And it really does seem that the federal policy has been more drafted to how do we allow that to happen rather than, allow the development to happen rather than to protect the grave sites. Yes, we're working on it, but it's definitely a struggle. I mean, the mere fact that it took over 10 years to close the gravesite at Semiyama. It went past the administration of my father and Willie Jones and Daryl over about 13 years because we couldn't get the fill that had the remains of our ancestors from a private property owner. There's always hurdles to overcome, and just as I said, the decisions that were made in this agreement between not just Lummi, but the other native nations of the federal government is still playing out. And those are the, if anything, again, going back to the opportunity to have a platform here at the college, that's the help that we need as tribal leaders. The recommendations of those policies that could be changed, your leadership is more than willing to advocate for those. And sometimes we may need to call upon either students here or graduates from institutions like this to help draft that out. Chief Salish and a few others would be better suited to answer that, but definitely through the discussion that we have with our elders, and it's actually hard to convey to folks at federal agencies like the Army Corps, is the interconnectedness between, the uplands and the surrounding waters of the site. That's actually a point of contention between the tribe and the feds. I mean, if you ask the feds, their what they call area of potential effect, the APE, is very narrow and limited, and it doesn't consider the other places that our elders and people we learn from say is connected to the site. With actual acreage, I would have that off the top of my head.
I think it's 50, 100, 300.
I wouldn't even be able to calculate it. I know that, I know when I'm up there, I know when I'm there. I mean, it's just,
I understand there's no boundaries to that, but
that's actually one that's hard to quantify. The State Archaeological Office, they've quantified it in one way of, where there's been disturbances and where things have been found. But we also know of other places where the same cultural properties exist. I mean, I don't have the exact footprint off the top of my head. Really quick on that one, the one thing that I did, if anyone hasn't been there, you should make your way there, and you'll ask yourselves, when you get that, it is a beautiful place. I was talking with Julie's mom about, our family has traveled to Hawaii a few times. It's definitely a beautiful place to go. And I noticed that there is some of the locals there brought us to areas that they said is special to them. And you drive through areas of development, refineries and stuff. And when I went there, and I came back home, I said, that is exactly what it looks like here at Cherry Point. And then it made me wonder, why did we choose that as one of our main village sites? And we had reef net sites throughout the San Juan Islands, located, one, for where the resource was, and two, because it well suited the community and sometimes provided protection. I really believe that Cherry Point's one of those. The story one of the stories I remember when I was a child was how there became red rocks on the beach. Summary of that is, at this village there was a family who did not put in their share. They did not contribute to the rest of the community. They didn't like to get up. They didn't like to go fish. They didn't like to go work. They liked to have things handed to them. as I may have hinted throughout the speech, that we come from a people who not only made peace, the counterpart to that is war, and we would engage in that. We would defend what is ours. We would defend our community if needed. In the story that was told to me, canoes came up and a warring party came to the beach. As families either fled or went to combat and fought and protected what's ours, the family that didn't put in their share tried to flee, ran across the beach, and they couldn't escape, and that their feet bled, and that the rocks on the beach were remnants of them, and a reminder to us that we must always contribute our share to the community, or else. When you go to Cherry Point, you can, the rocks that are there, when you walk down the beach to the proposed site, to where our reef net sites are at, you think to yourself, how difficult, it's hard to walk on the beach. That's probably a defense mechanism of whoever comes in. They'll be slowed down by coming ashore. Also, what's interesting is Cherry Point and Chiwitsin from the Lower Elwha people, who also went through their own battles of protecting a village site. Both of those locations were the prime spots to have cobble choppers. And you can see remnants of that, it's a sense of industry. I mean, those are in Salish Sea that one could make those tools, and they're probably traded amongst people. So the exact calculation of the footprint, I don't have off the top of my head, but the importance it is to the people is definitely.
This conference is about speaking on how to protect the Salish Sea. The next big threat I see is oil by rail. And what would happen to the Salish Sea if one of these increasingly frequent oil trains was to end up in the NWIC or Chestnut Bay or some body of water that's connected to the Salish Sea. And I know you've done wonderful things with the Army Corps in terms of Cherry Point, but we are also being attacked on another front right now. Maybe we can take the wait and see attitude, or we could do something proactive. And I'm wondering if the Lummi Nation has thought of anything that they could do proactively to protect the Salish Sea from oil by rail.
I mean, definitely the current attention for the tribes and many tribes is the process related to Cherry Point, but definitely the bigger discussion that we've had, at least with other tribes, have been all of the potential threats from fossil fuels. If it's a discussion of how to support our neighboring tribal nations in Canada with their concerns of LNG, or if it's fuel by rail, or even worse, the potential for more of those fuel tankers to collide with themselves in the water. Those are definitely part of the discussion, and kind of on docket for things next for not just our tribe, but the other tribal communities to address. Shirley?
Yeah. Cousin Tim. My name is Shirley Williams, and we're here today to talk about how to protect the Salish Sea. I'm wondering, as far as natural, cultural, and historical restoration, if our leaders or the Congress are thinking about how we're going to address we go forward. I know as far as culture goes, tradition, culture, language, Hales gave us these gifts, and we were able to utilize them freely in the beginning. And I know as far as our Title 40 code goes, that should be able to utilize these gifts without obstruction. And from what I perceive, it should be as natural as breath. I know with NCAI's report on October 2015 regarding resiliency and trauma, they talk about our historical trauma, our historical oppression, the adverse childhood experience, and our resilience and resistance. I know out of the historical oppression, unfortunately, as we become more assimilated and the divide and conquer has come through, we have experienced a lot of oppression amongst each other that we are still trying to heal from, and so that our children will be able to hang on to our culture. Out of the 34 nations and British Columbia, they're at 3% or below of being able to hang on to our language. I always like to think of the concept of the picture that I seen at the Royal BC Museum, where 101 years ago, our people were standing in their traditional regalia. They were getting into the traveling canoes with the bedwood boxes with no shoes on. That was 101 years ago. So their language, their culture, their tradition, their right, their ecological health was intact. And right now, I don't know my language, and I want that for my for the future generations. So I'm just wondering where we're at, where we'll be in 100 years from now. And I know I was looking at this. The Queen has, I know the Queen has some laws that for her to protect her sovereignty rights. So I'm wondering if you've looked at those aspects. And I always also like to look at the bioengineers. I'm sure some people have heard of bioengineers. Anyways, they're a group that get together that work with First Nation peoples. I hope I have that right. But when they are taking in all of their working with the tribes or the elders or the spiritual leaders, and they are bringing in all of this different information, what they do at any one of their books or whatever, they recognize the intellectual properties and the traditional based knowledges, and so everything ends up going back to the tribes. I think that it has to be done at a federal level to protect it, because within our own nations we want our culture to be able to flourish. And I also was thinking about, I think that's it.
Yeah,
I'm having more nervousness talking to my own
I don't know if Ray is still here. It actually makes me so the oh man, I think it's hard for a tribal council to come to a conclusion and a decision. Getting the federal government is equally or even tougher than that when it comes to intellectual properties. The difficulty of translating what we interpret things to be and getting the federal government to understand that is very difficult. In terms of protecting cultural properties, things are being done, things are being attempted. Ray asked about that a few minutes ago. We were invited to testify at field hearings where we could speak of the injustice that's happened in the most recent years, regardless of Semiyama or the potential threat of developing on some of our village sites. But that doesn't guarantee that federal law would be drafted. It takes the tenacity and grit of community leadership to have a memory of what's important and to act when needed. But being able to define it as Native people is very important. Thanking again Chief Salish for opening in the language, for any of my colleagues, for any of the faculty here at the college, This year, the Lummi Council actually made it a priority to adopt and implement a plan, an action plan. It has there's 8 different things that could be enacted, both at the tribal level and hopefully with the education system, that 20 years from now, a person who graduates from our school system has the opportunity so that they can speak the story of the flood, our origin story, in the language. It's such a lofty goal, but I think that it could happen. And if that does happen, there'd be more people that you hear would say, "Ait squile, ait squachio, uayashqual." They would reply with the "ites" and all. They'd be able to speak a lot more fluent and better than I could. They could be able to understand it better than I could. Dr. Guillory, if you can help out with that in any way, we appreciate the help. Not putting it all on one person, but again, taking the opportunity to speak to some of our partners that we don't always get to. And we could get to that point of having a better understanding of what our elders are trying to tell us.
And just the Human Rights Film Festival is having Dr. Clearwater, I believe his name is, from Montana, who has a film called Language Healers. And he's going to be here for 4 days and showing his film here on the 27th, I believe, twice, like at noon and then in the evening at 6:30. And he's willing to meet with Lummi language speakers or people who are interested in what he's able to help.
Awesome. Fantastic. And I apologize, what neighboring school do we have?
We're from Explorations Academy.
Explorations Academy. Want to offer the opportunity. Is there any questions?
I'm curious how you guys would like to, I need to know if you're curious how you guys would like to expand the college in the future.
How we'd like to...
Expand the college into, or what you were saying.
Oh, the... Dr. Guillory? No, the long term, no, there is... So when I attended, I'll answer it this way, the summer programs here, the facilities, if you get a chance, I think that everybody's more than welcome to tour the facilities on the south side of Quina. About a 10-year planning process has grown these great facilities that will be here for generations and help teach people. Not just Lummi tribal members, it's a facility that's open to anyone who wants to attend. And a lot of discussions that I haven't been in have happened probably since late 1990s, and through hard work, fundraising, and also folks who brought in new curriculums. They've expanded from a community college to a college that offers 6 bachelor's degrees. The plan, what I'd like to see is that there's master's programs for what the community needs, and how that looks is that takes just as much thought that has gone into the development of this campus right now. I do know that there's going to be an athletic facility sometime soon, possibly.
Yeah, I just want to quickly say, I just really want to give this is the focus on Chairman Ballew, and just encourage all of the questions to be directed and stay on topic of the Salish Sea speaker series. But the college, yes, we certainly have come a long way. We have great leaders. We're standing on the shoulders of giants here. We're wrapping up our current strategic plan, but just, we have a captive audience here. Over this next year, we're going to be planning for our next 7-year strategic plan. So we're going to do a community needs survey and have a lot of focus groups. And so perhaps in this survey, we're going to have ideas about if we're going to eventually offer more bachelor's degrees or maybe even pursue master's degree, and that's not a statement, I'm just saying maybe. And but the other thing I just want to clarify, we have 4 bachelor's degrees, we have 6 extended campus sites, so I just want to clarify that. Of course, as Chairman Ballew said, everything that we have here, we have a wonderful vision that has a strong vision here amongst the Lummi people, and so I'm just very thankful as a guest here to serve the tribe and help to advance the vision forward. So perhaps we get in another opportunity or venue to talk more about specifically the next steps and the vision of Northwest Indian College in alignment with the overall vision of the Lummi Nation and other tribal communities we serve. So just want thank you. Appreciate it.
Probably have time for one, at most maybe 2 more questions, so great.
My name is Sunny, I'm speaking here at NWIC. I was just wondering, you're speaking at Western as well, and with this grant, it's a matter of kind of melding these 2 institutions together. And so, what kind of topics are you planning on talking at Western? So there's a pretty specific crowd here, but it's a little bit different over there. So how do you kind of paddle together in shared waters and make these points to people about having sacred sites and how these are really important for today, and so how are you going to kind of use that?
I don't know yet. We have a couple hours until then, and that's my task to figure that out.
Exactly what I
Another thing I'm grateful for is, just as I mentioned, not only standing on the shoulders of giants, but also having a great staff of folks who help look into policy work, legal work, technical work, and not just having a seat at the UN, but recognition of UNDRIP. We've most recently had the discussion of victories that Canadian First Nations have had based on UNDRIP, and how that could be applied or shared here with Lummi and surrounding Coast Salish tribes. So those discussions are definitely evolving, and personally I don't see my people smiling upon the idea of me traveling to the UN whenever it's called, but I would welcome it. Exactly how we get there and how we get the representation for the Native people would be an achievement.
Didn't we have a wisdom keeper from one of our elder tribe, the other tribe, speak on behalf of Native Americans at the UN? Warren I?
Mm-hmm.
Who? Really Warren I suggest.
Okay, thank you very much for answering those questions and for the wonderful talk. But before I close it down, 2 orders of business. One, I just want to again honor and open up the floor for Tom Sampson,
know the issues we're faced with in terms of the education of our people, the rights of our people, not just here in the United States, but across Canada. And I'm from Vancouver Island, British Columbia. And just recently, we had an election. We elected a man called Justin Trudeau, and he's a different kind of a man. In fact, he startled all of us by some of the things that he said in his campaign and promises that he said, I will live up to, and I have 4 years to do it. But one of the things I think that's important for the institutions is to realize that, like the President of the United States said, Obama said, the people who really know this land better than anybody else is the citizens who've always been here, and we should listen to them. That's the President of the United States. The President that's coming up that wants to be President, we have some fears about the way they talk, because it's not exactly friendly. Because when you talk about people, human lives, we have been a victim of the most tragic stories that North America can ever tell. And that's never really been told. But in the last few weeks, the government of Canada and the Prime Minister and all the Christian churches met in Ottawa about 2 weeks ago. And the churches were asked to account for their involvement in the education of our children. The Anglican Church, I think, was one of the most clear and straightforward about their answers. They said the Christian movement had only one agenda, and that was to totally eradicate the First Nations people of this country, if not North America. And that's exactly what they did. You know, they put us in schools. They didn't want to educate us. They taught us how to be laborers. We never got no training about the things we talked about today. So we have been in court where I live. I've been in court about, I don't know, the last 50 years, arguing our point about who we are. The sad story about that is that, you know, history already knows how long we've been here, but yet we're being constantly challenged about how we can contribute something sensible to this civilized country. And I go back to what Obama said, you know, he said, you know, these Indians know more than we do. How come we don't listen to them? And I think that's where we're going now in Canada. Because the last two years, the Supreme Court of Canada has said that indigenous rights exist. Indigenous law is law in this country. 2 cases were brought forward in Canada against Wet'suwet'en and the Chilcotin people. And they contributed their testimony based on their language, the history of their language. And lo and behold, the Supreme Court of Canada said, these people own this land. They own all the traditional lands that they can know and that they can put their finger on and call it by what it is. And those two nations made up of about 30 tribes, I think, they stuck together and they believed in what they were saying because they used their language. And I think that's what's important here in the United States, is that we begin to teach our children not only the language, but to walk hand in hand with the new citizens of this country. Because once we let go, then the children will lose. our next generation will lose. Because it's the children that matter now. We're too old now. And I don't take offense to that. It just means that we know more. So I think we should spend a lot of energy with our institutions, the education institutions, to begin to really truly elaborate on what this country is made of. Because it's important. You know, I traveled quite a bit, you know, across Canada, the United States. I went with Sharon there a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago. Went to Minnesota and talked to those people about their rights and the water quality. It's really not the government. I think this is something we have to concentrate on. It's really not the government that makes decisions. It's the corporate world. If you listen to Trump guy talking, you know, really hear the corporation talking. It's not about government. It's about what the rights of the corporation are about. That's what he's saying. And I hope, you know, that we as a people here in the Pacific Northwest, no matter where you come from, we're talking about the Salish Sea. We know what it means in our language. We have a name for it. And we know that those waters have to be protected. The land, the mountains are the biggest contributors to the life of this ocean. Because it provides food and energy to the ocean. So we have to, together, walk together. Maybe we're a different color, maybe we're not as educated as some of you. I never got out of high school. I barely got out of grade 8. But I learned one thing. I listened to my great-grandmother, who was my teacher. I never spoke English until I was 7 years old. And when my great-grandmother died, she was 125. So I spent the last 40 years of her life listening to some of the things that I never thought would be relevant in this day and age. And there are so many of our elders that know that history and that know the meaning of survival. The Chilcotin people talked about their survival, these people from the mountains, the Williams Lake area in British Columbia. Said, we come from the bush and we know the economy of the bush. Well, same for us here. People, sense of Australia, the people who come from, who live on the edge of the ocean, the water, we know what their economy is about. We know it's really good, by the way. So I think as you begin to develop your institutions, your relationship with each other, you're going to have to be real tolerant. Because we're different. We're different. You know, when 9/11 came along, it caused a lot of problems for Indian people because the border became a big issue. And when Sharon King hired me to come over here to help, and when that happened, she said, you've got to get a passport. So, God, I've never had a passport before. So, well, go to immigration. Your immigration office in Victoria, they'll give you one. So I went there, and the guy going through the books, Mr. Sampson, who are you anyhow? You're not even here. I said, holy smokes. I've been here for 72 years. I don't know who I am, man. I don't know who I am. So, anyway, immigration, where do you live anyway? I said, I live in Brentwood. I've been there for 72 years. So that's 8 years ago now. And he said, well, you're not a Canadian. Oh, good grief. You know, I said, well, what do I do? Well, where were you born? I said, I was born in Yakima. Oh, that's what it is. So, who are your parents? I said, well, my mother was an S person. My father's Salish. And can I see your parents' marriage certificate? So I had to do that research, and then all of a sudden I found out my mother and my dad didn't get married till the third child was born. I was registered as American for 72 years and didn't know it. So that's the challenges we face as First Nations people. It's because they don't want to recognize us. They don't acknowledge anything we know. And it's when you look at the Constitution of the United States, as well as the Constitution of Canada. Canada passed a law recognizing Aboriginal and treaty rights in 1982. And the Supreme Court judges said this, and I think it's important to the American people, First Nations people. They said, the Supreme Court said 2 times, these people had laws long before French and English came to Canada. And what it says is if they had laws, then it means that their common laws exist. And common law is a universal right around the world. So the Crown, the Supreme Court said, these people had laws long before you come across the ocean. So they recognize our inherent and indigenous rights now. The right to our traditional territory, and the right to enhance the languages that they took away from us. And I think that's a challenge, that Washington State, the Lummi tribe state, well, we all face that. It's interesting to listen to some of the universities and colleges that I spoke at over the last few years. They see me as an Indian, and I tell them I'm part of Nez-Perce. And this one kind of raised his hand and found out, yes, sir. He said, do you have a horse? I said, well, Nez-Perce is for the best breeder of horses, and you don't have a horse. I said, no, I have a canoe. Those are the images that they have about what an Indian is. Sad to say, 2010. I sit on the National Pro Board in Canada, and I work for the part-time job with the correctional center. We do survey talk with the institutions. One of the institutions said this: these people are still savages. The year 2010, we're still savages. It's amazing. But anyway, I want to thank whoever actually say something. Invited me over here, and Daryl, he come here quite a bit. He told me to take out membership here. I said, I'm already American. I don't know, maybe I will register here one day. But I want to thank you and the Lummi people for hosting this gathering. I hope it develops into a relationship where we can truly walk together and understand each other. And most of all, accept each other. Because this is who we are. We can't change. We're this person, and I won't change. And I hope as we move along in our lifetime, that you accept the things that the Lummi is trying to offer us, to offer this institution. It's a golden opportunity. I've always admired Lummi for the way they've developed their institutions in terms of certification on the educational program. I think that's great. But now we've got to bring the rest of you in and become Lummis too. So I hope that we become better friends. Thank you.
Nice.
So thank you, Tom, and thank you to our honorable guest, Holman, Chairman Ballew, for an amazing talk. Let's give Chairman Ballew one more hand. And so to appreciate appreciate the good work that he has done. I actually also want to invite his parents up, former Chairman Ballew to come up as well, and then also Laurel Ballew. We have gifts for each of you, so if you can come up. But first of all, I want to thank you. We have a gift from the college, from our students. BSNAS students are providing this for you.
Thank you.
It's the 30th anniversary of the
right. Thank you.
And this is for you. You've been an amazing instructor, faculty member, and obviously a great mother. And a great father, former chairman, and an amazing instructor. This is the 10th anniversary print of the Vine Deloria Symposium. So let's give a round of applause to the music. Yeah, thank you. And thank you to all the guests for coming out from our high schools, our community members. We have council members, faculty, students. This is truly an amazing event. Thank you to everybody coming out, and I really look forward to seeing some of you at Western at 4 o'clock.